I smiled at my mother across that dinner table and said the word that changed everything. No. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just no. And in that single syllable, I watched 28 years of family manipulation crack open like rotten wood. But let me back up because the moment I walked through that front door an hour earlier, I already knew something was wrong. The house smelled like Mom's famous pot roast. Candles flickered on the dining table. Everything looked perfect, too perfect, like a stage set waiting for the actors to deliver bad news. I'd driven 2 hours thinking this was an early birthday celebration for Mom. I even brought a gift bag with her favorite lavender soap inside. But the second I stepped into the foyer, the air felt thick. Heavy. Wrong. Dad was pacing near the kitchen counter, hands shoved deep in his pockets. Mom sat rigid at the head of the table, her phone face down beside an untouched plate. My sister Rhea looked like she wanted to crawl under the floorboards. And my brother Tobin? Nowhere to be seen. That's when I should have turned around and left. Elias, Dad said, not even looking at me. His voice had that forced calm tone people use right before they ask you to do something terrible. We need to talk. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family, enjoy the story. For words that never, ever end well, we need to talk. I set down the gift bag slowly, like I was defusing a bomb. Sure, I said, forcing a smile that probably looked more like a grimace. What's going on? Mom's fingers drummed once against the table. Your brother's in trouble. I didn't even blink. Again? Rhea let out a small, bitter laugh that she quickly tried to cover with a cough. Dad shot her a look that could freeze fire. This time it's serious, Mom continued, her voice climbing half an octave higher. He owes money to people who aren't reasonable. Dangerous people, Elias. I pulled out a chair and sat down slowly, my stomach already tightening into a knot. How much are we talking about? The silence that followed felt like falling. Dad cleared his throat. $110,000. The number hung in the air like smoke. I heard it. I processed it. But my brain refused to accept it as real. Come again. 110,000, Dad repeated, each word deliberate and heavy. We don't have that kind of money, Elias. He paused, and his eyes finally met mine. But you do. Time stopped. The candles kept flickering. The pot roast kept steaming. But everything else in that room froze solid. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because my body didn't know what else to do with the absurdity of what I'd just heard. It came out short and sharp, like a bark. You're kidding, I said. Please tell me you're kidding. Mom's jaw tightened. We're not. You want me to hand over my entire savings account because Tobin gambled away $100 grand? He didn't mean to, Mom started. I held up one hand. Stop. Don't you dare defend him right now. Dad's palm slammed against the table hard enough to make the silverware jump. Watch your tone. He's your brother. And I'm your son, I said quietly, my voice steady even though my pulse was hammering in my ears. But that's never mattered as much, has it? Mom stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. Don't you dare make this about favoritism. We're asking for family support, Elias. Family. Family support? I repeated slowly, tasting each word like poison. Or financial slavery? That's when the Real shouting started. That's when everything I'd buried for years came clawing its way to the surface. And that's when I realized, for the first time in my entire life, I was done being their safety net. What would you do if your family demanded your life savings to fix someone else's mistakes? Mom's hands were shaking as she pointed at me across the table. Actually shaking. Like I was the criminal here. Like every word I said was an accusation against her that she couldn't defend. Her lips trembled as she said, If you don't help your brother, Elias, he could get hurt. Badly hurt. Do you want that blood on your hands? The air in the dining room felt heavy, thick with guilt and perfume and the faint smell of the roast she'd made to keep things civil. I looked at her, really looked, and saw someone who'd spent her entire life cleaning up after other people's disasters and calling it love. Something inside me snapped clean in half. He's been hurting himself for years, I said, my voice calm in the way that terrified me most. You've just been funding it. Dad's face went from pale to red so quickly, it was almost impressive. He leaned forward, his jaw tightening the way it always did when he was about to pretend this was about morality and not money. You're selfish, he said, each syllable clipped and sharp. We raised you better than this. The laugh that came out of me didn't sound human. It was a sound pulled from the part of me that had spent decades swallowing resentment and pretending it tasted like duty. No, I said slowly, standing up. My chair scraped against the hardwood like the sound of something ending. You raised me to fix your mistakes, to be the backup plan, the emergency fund, the responsible one who never complains. Rhea, my sister, sucked in a sharp breath. She looked at me like I'd just pulled a pin from a grenade and tossed it between the wine glasses. Mom leaned forward, her voice dropping into that low, dangerous whisper. The one that used to make me freeze when I was 10, and she'd say, "Don't make me regret trusting you. If you refuse to help, Elias," she said, every word shaking with restrained fury, "don't expect anything from us ever again. No inheritance. No family home. Nothing. You'll be cut off completely." The words hit the table like a gavel. Final. I could practically hear the echo. It should have hurt. God, it should have broken me. I'd spent my whole life trying to earn approval that never came, thinking one day they'd look at me the way they looked at him, with concern instead of contempt, forgiveness instead of expectation. But instead, I just felt free. Because between her words and my heartbeat, something clear settled in me. I'd already been cut off. Emotionally. Spiritually. They'd stopped seeing me as a person years ago. I was just an insurance policy they kept alive. A small smile, fragile but real, touched my lips. Then I guess we're finally even. The silence that followed could have swallowed the room whole. The chandelier light flickered. Dad's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Mom's face drained of color, and Rhea just stared, like she'd seen a ghost stand up from the table and speak in my voice. I reached for my keys. The metal clinked softly against the wood, a sound that somehow felt louder than any of the shouting that came before. The gift bag I'd brought, a bottle of wine, a peace offering I'd talked myself into, sat unopened in the center of the table. I left it there. Elias. Dad's voice cracked behind me, anger colliding with disbelief. Don't you dare walk out that door. But I did. The front door closed behind me with the softest click, the kind of sound that marks the end of something you can never go back to. I walked out into the cool evening air. The sky was streaked orange and blue, the kind of quiet dusk that made everything feel temporary. My car sat at the curb, a silent witness to years of restraint finally unraveling. I got in. I started the engine. I didn't look back as their voices rose behind me, angry, desperate, confused. I could almost picture Dad slamming his fist on the table, Mom crying into her hands, Rhea frozen in place. But I didn't turn around. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the villain for choosing peace over obligation. By the time I reached the highway, my phone was vibrating nonstop.
Dad. Mom.
Dad again. Each call went to voicemail, one after another, like waves crashing on a shore I'd finally left behind. Then came a text from Rhea. "I'm sorry. I didn't know they'd ambush you like this." I pulled into a gas station parking lot and just sat there, the fluorescent lights buzzing above like judgment. My fingers hovered over the screen. I could have told her I was fine. I could have lied. Instead, I typed, "Don't apologize. They needed someone to blame, and I'm convenient. Always have been." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then came back. "What are you going to do?" I stared at her message for a long time. I could see my reflection in the windshield, tired eyes, a half smile, a man who'd finally stopped mistaking duty for love. I thought about all the times I'd bailed my brother out, the DUIs, the unpaid debts, the lies. I thought about how every favor I did only made me smaller in their eyes, easier to take for granted. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but I knew what I wasn't going to do anymore. Play the role they'd written for me. So I put my phone down, started the car again, and let the hum of the engine drown out the ringing that had lived in my chest for years. Sometimes walking away doesn't mean giving up. It means you've finally realized the fire you've been trying to put out your whole life was never yours to control. Do you think he made the right choice walking away, or should family, no matter how broken, always come first? I didn't sleep that night.
Couldn't.
Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces, Mom's trembling hands, Dad's red fury, Ria's wide eyes. The dinner table replayed on a loop, the silence afterwards stretching like an echo I couldn't escape. So instead of lying in bed and letting it rot in my head, I sat at my kitchen table, the clock blinking 1:47 a.m., laptop open, and the hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the room. I started clicking through files like a man possessed. Every account, every transaction, every corner of my financial life. The ones I'd built through years of missed weekends, double shifts, and early mornings where exhaustion sat heavier than my coffee mug. The numbers glowed back at me in sterile white and blue light. $127,000 in savings. That was what my entire adult life had distilled into. Late nights, broken relationships, skipped vacations, all compressed into neat little digits on a screen. And my parents wanted me to hand it over like it was pocket change. Like I hadn't built it dollar by dollar, sacrifice by sacrifice. But beneath that anger was something else. A colder, older itch. Something that had been sitting deep in my mind for years, whispering in the background. The family trust. My grandfather, Dad's father, had been a hard man but fair. One of those men who believed in earning your keep but protecting your own. Before he died, he'd set up a trust fund. Equal shares for the three of us. Me, Ria, and Tobin. We could access it after turning 30, but until then, Dad would manage it. Grandpa had believed that giving control to the eldest son would keep the family united. I almost laughed at the irony. Or at least, that was the story we'd been told. I opened a folder buried deep in my drive, a copy of the trust documents I'd secretly scanned years ago when I first got suspicious. I remembered the day clearly. Dad had dismissed my questions about strange, administrative withdrawals with that tired smile he used when he wanted to shut me down. I'd let it go back then. Told myself I was paranoid. But not tonight. Not after everything that had just happened. I scrolled through the documents, my eyes scanning line after line. It started small, a $15,000 withdrawal in March 2019. Labeled Family Emergency. The same month Tobin got his DUI and needed bail money. Another in July 2021, $22,000. Marked as Family Business Venture. That was when Tobin's little tech startup crashed after 3 months. Then $8,500, $12,000, $9,200. Always around the same pattern. Always right after Tobin messed something up. Every single one of those family emergencies had Tobin's name written all over it. My pulse started to pound in my ears. I leaned closer to the screen, the glow painting my hands in cold light. It was so obvious now. Too obvious. They hadn't just been helping him out of their pockets. They'd been using mine. Using Ria's. Using the inheritance Grandpa had set aside for us to build our futures. They'd gutted it piece by piece, and we hadn't even noticed. My throat felt tight. My hands were shaking as I clicked through the pages, each new entry like a punch I hadn't seen coming. I wasn't sure if it was rage or heartbreak that made my chest hurt more. Dad had been stealing from his own children, dressing it up as family maintenance. And Mom had known. Of course she had. She'd always known. I sat back slowly, staring at the ceiling, the reality of it spreading through me like smoke. Years of hard work, loyalty, obedience, all of it turned into leverage. I thought about every guilt trip, every speech about doing what's right for the family, every time they told me I was ungrateful when I hesitated to help Tobin. All the while, they'd been draining the safety net that was supposed to belong to all of us. I whispered into the empty room. You've been stealing from me for years. The words hung in the air, heavy, final. For a long while, I just sat there, listening to the hum of the fridge, the soft tick of the clock, the faint rush of wind outside. My reflection stared back at me from the laptop screen. Tired eyes, clenched jaw, the kind of expression you make when you finally see the truth and wish you hadn't. A part of me wanted to drive straight to their house, slam the documents on the table, and watch their faces fall apart under the weight of it. To hear them stammer. To make them admit it. But another part of me, the colder, quieter part, told me to wait. To gather everything. To make it airtight. If they'd lied about this, what else had they buried? How deep did it go? I started downloading the records, saving every PDF, every timestamp, every transaction trail I could find. I backed them up on a flash drive, then uploaded copies to the cloud. If my father thought he could rewrite the truth, I was going to make sure I had the receipts. Literally. By the time I finished, dawn was starting to edge through the blinds. I hadn't moved in hours. My coffee sat untouched, cold and bitter beside me. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about trust, about the years they'd spent preaching responsibility while quietly robbing their own children blind. I closed the laptop, exhaled, and rubbed my face. The anger had burned down to something steadier now.
Focus.
I wasn't going to let them gaslight me again.
Not this time.
Would you confront your family immediately? Blow it all up before they could spin another lie? Or would you wait, collect every last shred of proof, and make sure there's no way out for them when the truth finally comes crashing down? The law office smelled like old books and expensive coffee. It felt like the kind of place secrets went to wear suits and die quietly. Marcus Chun sat across from me. The trust documents spread between us like evidence at a crime scene. His pen tapped against the paper, a metronome counting out a slow, inevitable rhythm. Marcus had been my attorney for 5 years, the guy who'd calmed me through bad leases and negotiated contracts when I was too tired to think straight. He had the patient face of someone who'd seen a lot and believed most things could be fixed with the right paperwork. Tonight, that face looked tired in a different way, like the gravity of what he was reading had pushed down on him. He flipped a page, then another, each turn making the little lamp on his desk throw new shadows. He stopped, took off his glasses, and rubbed the bridge of his nose. This is pretty damning, Elias. Tell me I'm not crazy, I said. My voice was steadier than I felt. I hardly recognized it. Tell me I'm seeing what I think I'm seeing. Marcus tapped a highlighted paragraph with deliberate calm. Your father has been making unauthorized withdrawals from the trust for at least 6 years. Maybe longer. These are just the records you had access to. There are transfers, backdated memos, entries labeled family expense, at times that perfectly coincide with Tobin's problems. It's not subtle. The words landed in my chest like cold stones. I could feel my pulse in my throat. Can we stop it? I asked. He looked at me, and for a moment the room was just 2 people and a stack of pages that used to be the safety net Grandpa had promised. We can freeze the account and request a formal audit or review by the trust administrator, he said. But you need to understand what that triggers. Once you file, the administrator opens an investigation. They'll examine all transactions, interview involved parties, and if they find mismanagement or fraud, there could be legal consequences, civil recovery for the beneficiaries, possibly criminal referral for embezzlement, depending on intent and jurisdiction. I thought of my mother's hands, trembling when she pointed at me like I was the villain in a story she'd already written. I thought of Dad's face, red as a warning light, and of all the times I'd handed him a check and felt like I'd donated part of myself. I thought of Tobin, a ghost who always showed up to ruin things and expected someone else to clean up his mess.
Do it, I said.
Marcus hesitated a fraction, then leaned back in his chair. You're sure? This will cause a rift. Probably permanent. I met his eyes without flinching. The rift's already there, Marcus. It's been there for years. I just stopped pretending it wasn't. He nodded like a man who'd seen that moment before, when a patient finally stopped muttering apologies and decided to get honest. He reached for his legal pad and began to write, each stroke of the pen a small, irreversible action. All right. I'll draft the complaint to the trust administrator today, he said. We'll request an immediate freeze on outgoing transactions pending review. Your father will not be able to make any withdrawals without all 3 beneficiaries signing off. I'll also submit the records you provided and request a full accounting. If the administrator finds probable mismanagement, we'll have leverage to recover funds, and we'll discuss whether a civil suit is appropriate." As he spoke, I pictured Dad pacing the kitchen, searching for excuses, for stories that would paint him as the protector rather than the thief. I pictured Mom crying about loyalty. I pictured Tobin shrugging, already calculating his next move. I imagined Rhea in the middle, torn between the sister she loved and the father she'd trusted. And Elias? Marcus's voice softened. "Be ready. Family doesn't go quietly when you take their leverage away. Once this ball starts rolling, your family is going to come at you hard, emotionally, legally, publicly. They'll say you betrayed them. They'll accuse you of greed. They might attempt to settle privately to avoid scandal. Prepare yourself." I stood up. The chair scraped the floor like an announcement. When I shook his hand, it felt like sealing something that couldn't be unsealed. "Let them come," I told him. Walking out of that office felt like stepping off a cliff, terrifying and oddly liberating at the same time. The October air hit my face, sharp and clean, like truth. My phone vibrated before I reached my car. A dozen missed calls, all from unknown numbers at first, then a string of them from home.
Dad. Mom.
Rhea. My thumb hovered over the screen and then deleted the notifications like pulling weeds. I thought about the trust as something more than money. Grandpa had meant it to be a ladder, something to climb on when the world tilted. He'd built it so his grandchildren would have a chance. Seeing those numbers siphoned off into bail money and bad investments felt like watching a house burn because someone couldn't resist playing with matches. I called Marcus on the drive home just to hear the plan again. He assured me he'd file everything first thing in the morning. He advised against posting anything online. Right now, he said, this is about creating a factual record and preserving assets. When I pulled into my driveway, the voicemail icon blinked with a new message. My mother's voice, thin and rising at the end. "Elias, please, we can talk. Don't make any reckless decisions." Dad's message was angry and clipped. "You don't understand everything, son. You're making a mistake you'll regret." Rhea's was softer. "Call me when you can." I sat in my car a long time, watching the evening fold into night. The quiet of it pressed against my ribs. My hands were steady now, but a tremor lurked under my skin, a nervous electricity waiting to be spent. There's a pull in these moments, the part of you that wants to fix things to patch the rift, to keep the family whole even if the fabric is rotten, and the part that remembers every time you were the only one who paid the bill, who bailed someone out, who swallowed your pride so others could keep theirs. I'd been a bank for too long. Was this revenge, or was it justice? I couldn't tell yet. Maybe the difference would be obvious once the numbers were laid bare and the motives clarified. Maybe justice would feel clean, like a wound stitched up. Maybe revenge would feel messy, warm with satisfaction. Marcus had said to be ready for them to come at me. I knew they would. I knew pleas would turn to threats, guilt would become weaponized, and loyalty would be invoked like a law that I must obey or be damned. I started the engine, the vibration thrumming through me like anticipation. The coming days would be loud, calls, letters, maybe even police reports or lawyers on the other side. I thought of the $127,000 glowing on my accounts back home, of the trust that barely remained like a skeletal promise. I breathed in, steadying myself, and thought of Grandpa's handwriting on that original trust document. Precise, deliberate, a man trying to rule the future from beyond his grave. If taking that money back made me the villain in their story, then so be it. I'd spent years living by their definition of duty. Tonight, I chose a different word. Was I punishing them or asking for what was mine? Where does justice end and vengeance begin? The silence lasted exactly 3 days. 3 days of stillness, so complete it almost felt like the world was holding its breath. I went to work, came home, cooked meals I'd barely tasted. The house was quiet, no calls, no messages, no guilt-laced check-ins from Mom pretending to care about my mental state. Just the hum of the fridge, and the sound of my own thoughts trying to convince me that peace wasn't the same thing as loneliness. Then my phone exploded. Dad called first.
Once. Twice.
Then again. By the fifth call, I'd stopped pretending I was even considering answering. The notifications stacked up like warning lights on a control panel. What did you do, Elias? Call me back right now. You've made a huge mistake. The words came in short, furious bursts, the kind that were meant to control, not communicate. Then Mom joined in. Her texts were longer, guiltier, dressed up in concern but still cutting at the edges. Your lawyer contacted the trust administrator. You're going too far. This is family business. We don't air it outside. Please, don't destroy your father over a misunderstanding. I sat there on my couch, staring at the screen, feeling strangely detached, like I was watching someone else's life unravel from the outside. The phone kept lighting up on the coffee table, vibrating against the wood like it was begging me to pick it up, but I didn't. It was almost peaceful, that separation. Around 7 that evening, my phone lit up again. Rhea. I hesitated, then answered. Oh my God, she breathed before I could even say hello. You actually did it. The trust is frozen. Dad's losing his mind. I leaned back, pressing the phone against my ear. Good. Elias, he's threatening to sue you. Mom's crying. Tobin's, she hesitated. Tobin doesn't even know yet. They haven't told him. Of course they hadn't. The irony almost made me laugh. Because then he'd have to face what he's done. Can't have that, can we? There was a pause, the kind that carries more honesty than words. What happens now? I took a slow breath. Now? The trust gets reviewed by someone who doesn't have a favorite child. If Dad's been doing what I think he's been doing, he'll have to explain every dollar. To the administrator. To us. Maybe even to a judge. Rhea didn't speak for a moment. When she finally did, her voice was softer. I'm proud of you. That stopped me. Yeah. I know that sounds weird, she said quickly. But someone needed to stop this. I just didn't have the guts. You did. Her words landed somewhere deep, between the part of me that wanted to feel vindicated and the part that just felt tired. After we hung up, I stared at the dark screen for a long time. Then I opened a new group chat. Mom.
Dad.
Rhea. Tobin. The nuclear family, all in one thread for the first time in months. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, the cursor blinking like a dare. I typed slowly, deliberately. I didn't take anything. I just stopped you from doing it again. The trust is now frozen pending review. Any withdrawals require all 3 signatures. That includes Tobin's debts. Good luck explaining that to him. My thumb hovered a second longer. Then I hit send. The message showed as delivered. Then read. 2 minutes later, my phone rang.
Dad.
I let it ring out. 30 seconds later, Mom.
Declined.
A new text appeared from a number I didn't recognize. No name. Just 10 digits and a message that made my blood run cold. You just signed your brother's death warrant. I stared at it, pulse thundering in my ears. For a moment, I thought it was Dad, a manipulation tactic, a guilt bomb meant to make me panic. But there was something about the tone that didn't sound like him. It was too blunt, too final. I reread it 3 times, my mind running through possibilities. Was it a threat? A warning? A bluff? Then a second message came through. You don't know who he owes. My chest tightened. I tried calling the number, but it went straight to voicemail. No name, no voice. Just a generic automated message. I stood up, pacing the living room. The air felt heavier now, pressing against my ribs. Tobin's debts. His business ventures. The unexplained withdrawals that kept him out of jail, out of danger, or so I'd assumed. Had I just pulled the last thread holding him together? My laptop was still open on the table. I sat down and started searching his name, checking news, court filings, anything that might tell me what kind of hole he'd dug himself into. Nothing concrete. Just noise, a few minor charges, an LLC dissolved 2 years ago, an old mugshot from the DUI. But there were also social media breadcrumbs, tags from people I didn't recognize, late-night photos with men who didn't look like friends. Faces blurred, arms draped around each other in bars and poker rooms. Hashtags like hashtag dealin' with the devil and hashtag Ridiorty. And suddenly, the picture started to form. Tobin wasn't just broke. He was in deep. The kind of deep that didn't come with second chances. I glanced at the text again. You don't know who he owes. My phone buzzed once more, making me jump. Another unknown number. This one came with an image. A photo of Tobin, sitting in a car, taken from outside the window. He wasn't looking at the camera. He looked tired, pale, his head in his hands. No caption this time. Just the picture. My fingers went numb. I tried calling the number again, voicemail. The messages were already gone when I looked back at my screen. Deleted. A chill ran through me, crawling up my spine like a hand pressing against my neck. Maybe freezing the trust hadn't just exposed my father's secrets. Maybe it had cut off the only money keeping Tobin safe. My phone buzzed again, this time with Ria's name. I hesitated before answering. Elias, she whispered, voice trembling. Something's wrong. Mom just called me crying. She said Tobin didn't come home last night. The room tilted slightly. My throat felt dry. What do you mean he didn't come home? She said he left after they told him about the trust. He didn't say where he was going. The line went quiet for a second. Then, faintly, I could hear Mom's sobs in the background. Ria's voice broke. Elias, what if that text wasn't a threat? I looked down at my phone, that last message still glowing on the screen like a prophecy. You just signed your brother's death warrant.
Who sent it?
And more importantly, how much time did I have before it came true? The pounding stopped, but the echo stayed, somewhere deep inside my chest. I didn't move for a long time. Just stood there, hand still on the door handle, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the wall clock. It was like my house had swallowed the noise, leaving only the sound of my own breathing. Through the narrow window beside the door, I watched Tobin's taillights vanish down the street. Red dots shrinking into the dark until they disappeared completely. Then nothing. No traffic. No sound. Just the kind of silence that feels heavier than shouting. For years, I'd imagined that confrontation. Thought about what I'd say if I ever found the courage to stop being the one who cleaned up his messes. But when it actually happened, it didn't feel victorious. It felt hollow. Like cutting out a tumor and realizing it had been part of you all along. I walked back to the kitchen and poured a glass of water, though my hands still trembled enough that half of it spilled onto the counter. I wiped it up mechanically, staring at the damp cloth, trying to ground myself. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, faint, fading, and for a second, I wondered if Tobin was already in trouble again. If the people he mentioned were real, or just another manipulation, another story to drag me back into his orbit. I wanted to believe this was justice, that what I'd done was necessary. But justice rarely feels clean. It leaves behind residue, the kind that clings to your conscience no matter how many times you wash your hands. I checked my phone again. No new messages. The silence from my parents was almost worse than the noise from Tobin. Mom would be crying, I knew that much. Dad would be pacing, furious, muttering about betrayal and respect. They'd make this about loyalty, about family, about everything except the truth. But for once, I wasn't the one who had to explain myself. The documents would do that for me. Every number, every withdrawal, every falsified note. The truth was out there now, moving on its own, like a current I couldn't stop even if I wanted to. I sank into the couch, Marcus's text still glowing on the screen. Stay strong. I stared at those two words until they blurred.
Strong.
What did that even mean anymore? Standing your ground? Losing everything to prove you're right? Watching your brother spiral and pretending it doesn't tear you apart? A sound outside snapped me out of it. A car engine again, slow this time. Not Tobin's beat-up sedan. This one was heavier. Quieter. The kind of car you don't notice until it's already there. Headlights washed over my living room curtains, then shut off. I set the phone down, stood up, and walked toward the window. A dark SUV sat at the curb. The engine off. No movement inside. My stomach tightened. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then the passenger door opened, and a figure stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark jacket. He didn't look like Tobin. He looked older. Meaner. He glanced up at my house, like he was confirming an address. Then he got back in, and the SUV rolled away, slow, deliberate. I stood there long after it disappeared, heart hammering. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was paranoia. But Tobin's words from earlier kept replaying in my head. Those people I owe money to? They don't care about family drama. I went to the front door, checked the lock. Then checked it again. Pulled the blinds down. Turned off the lights. The house felt smaller in the dark, the walls closer. I tried to convince myself that I was imagining things, that I just had an emotional night, that no one was coming after anyone. But when I sat back down on the couch, I noticed something on the floor, just inside the door. A folded piece of paper, slipped under the threshold. I stared at it, not wanting to touch it, not wanting to know. Eventually, I crouched and picked it up. Unfolded it slowly. No words, just a photo. Tobin, standing in front of what looked like a bar, talking to a man in the same kind of jacket I'd just seen. The man's face was turned toward the camera, half-lit, eyes cold and unfamiliar. My throat went dry. I flipped the paper over. A message scrawled in black ink. Tell him to pay up. He's out of time. My hands shook so hard I almost dropped it. I sat down, staring at that photo until the edges blurred. Maybe I'd been too late to save Tobin. Maybe freezing the trust had just accelerated what was already coming. Maybe this was the cost of drawing a line, not just the loss of family, but the danger that came with it. The phone buzzed again, and I nearly jumped. It was Rhea. Her message was short. Have you heard from Tobin? Mom says he's not answering anyone. I stared at the text for a long time, then glanced back at the photo. My reflection warped in the glossy surface, pale and tired. No, I hadn't heard from him. But something told me I was about to. And whatever came next, it wouldn't be a phone call. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, certified mail, official seal. I signed for it with shaking hands, already knowing what it was. Trust review results, Warren Family Estate. I sat at my kitchen table and opened it slowly, like it might explode. The words swam on the page at first. Legal jargon. Administrative language. Then I found the summary section, and everything became crystal clear. After comprehensive review of account activity from 2017 to 2025, this office has identified systematic mismanagement of trust funds by trustee David Warren. Unauthorized withdrawals totaling $147,600 were made without beneficiary consent or proper documentation. Funds were redirected to personal accounts and third-party debts not covered under trust provisions. $147,000. I read it 3 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. Effective immediately, David Warren is removed as trustee. Control is transferred to neutral administrator Harrison and Associates. Future distributions require unanimous consent of all 3 beneficiaries. My phone rang before I even finished reading. Rhea. Did you get it? She asked, her voice somewhere between laughing and crying. Just opened it. Holy hell, Elias. 147,000. That's almost half the trust. I closed my eyes. How are they taking it? Dad looks like he aged 10 years overnight. Mom won't come out of her bedroom. And Tobin.
She paused.
Tobin finally knows everything. Dad had to tell him why the money dried up. And he threw a lamp through the living room window. Despite everything, I almost smiled. Sounds about right. Dad wants to meet with you, Rhea said carefully. Face to face. He asked me to set it up. My first instinct was to refuse. But something in her tone made me pause. What do you think? I think, she sighed. I think he's finally scared. Really scared. Not of lawyers or consequences, but of losing you permanently. That's different than before. I tapped my fingers against the table. Coffee shop. Halfway between us. Public place. 1 hour. I'll tell him. After we hung up, I stared at that official letter for a long time, reading and rereading the words that had just rewritten my family's entire dynamic. Freedom. That's what this was. Painful, messy, hard-won freedom. Would you meet with a parent who betrayed your trust, Or is some damage irreparable? Dad looked smaller than I remembered. Older. The coffee shop lighting wasn't doing him any favors, highlighting every new line on his face, every gray hair I hadn't noticed before. He sat across from me with his hands folded on the table, staring at them like they belonged to someone else. He hadn't ordered anything. Neither had I. The silence stretched between us like a canyon. Finally, he spoke. You embarrassed us. Not, I'm sorry. Not, I was wrong. Just, you embarrassed us. I leaned back in my chair. You tried to blackmail me. I'd call that even. He flinched like I'd thrown hot coffee in his face. His jaw worked for a moment before he continued. The whole family knows now.
Rhea.
The cousins. Your Aunt Margaret called asking questions. Good, I said simply. Secrets only protect the people who benefit from them. Your brother's in bad shape, Elias. Real bad. Dad's voice cracked slightly. He's talking about leaving the state. Disappearing. Maybe he should, I said, keeping my tone neutral. Fresh start. No safety net. Might be exactly what he needs. Dad's eyes finally met mine, and I saw something I'd never seen before. Genuine fear. Not anger. Not disappointment.
Fear.
When did you become so cold? The question hung in the air like smoke. I thought about it, really thought about it, before answering. I'm not cold, I said quietly. I'm just done being warm for people who keep burning me. He looked away, blinking rapidly. Your mother thinks I should apologize. She thinks that would fix things. Would it be real? I asked. Or would it just be damage control? The silence that followed answered my question. I leaned forward, resting my arms on the table. Dad, you stole from me. From Rhea. You took money Grandpa set aside to protect us and handed it to Tobin like it was yours to give. That's not a mistake. That's betrayal. I was trying to save him, Dad said, his voice barely above a whisper. No, I replied. You were trying to save yourself from having to watch him fail. There's a difference. His hands trembled slightly on the table. For the first time in my entire life, my father looked defeated. So what now? He asked. You never speak to us again? That's it. I thought about that question, really thought about what I wanted.
Now,
I said slowly. Now you learn to live with the consequences of your choices. Just like you've been trying to teach everyone else their whole lives. I stood up, leaving him sitting there alone in that coffee shop booth. As I reached the door, I heard him call out, Elias. I turned. You've changed, he said. I nodded. I had to. Is forgiveness possible after this kind of betrayal, or is walking away the healthiest choice? For months passed like a dream I couldn't quite wake up from. I threw myself into work, picked up new clients, started traveling for the first time in years. Arizona, Colorado, places I'd always wanted to see, but kept putting off for family obligations. The family group chat stayed silent. No birthday reminders. No Sunday dinner invitations. Just empty space where chaos used to live. Rhea texted me occasionally with updates. Dad had gotten a part-time job to help pay bills. Mom had started seeing a therapist. Small changes. Quiet ones. And Tobin? Radio silence. Until one evening in October, when I was standing on a hiking trail overlooking the painted desert, watching the sunset turn the rocks every shade of orange and red. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. The first one in months. Tobin's in rehab. He checked himself in 3 weeks ago.
he asked about you.
We all miss you. Please come home when you can. I stared at those words until the screen went dark, then read them again when I woke it back up. Rehab. He actually went to rehab. I sat down on a rock, the desert wind pulling at my jacket, and typed slowly. Tell him I'm proud. I'll come when everyone's ready to talk, not yell. The 3 dots appeared, disappeared,
Appeared again.
Finally, we'll be ready. I sat there for another hour, watching the sun disappear below the horizon, turning the sky purple and pink and gold. Something inside my chest loosened. Not completely, but enough to breathe deeper than I had in months.
My phone buzzed again.
This time, Rhea. He's doing it, Elias. Tobin's actually doing the work. 30 days clean. Seeing a counselor. It's real. Good. I typed back. Tell him to keep going. Not for me. For himself. When are you coming home? I looked out at the desert one more time, at all that empty, beautiful space. Soon, I wrote. But I'm bringing the new me, not the old one. We're counting on it. Does someone have to hit rock bottom before they can truly change? 6 weeks later, I pulled into my parents' driveway for the first time since that disastrous dinner. The house looked the same. The porch light still flickered. The mailbox still leaned slightly to the left. But something felt different. Lighter somehow. Rhea opened the door before I could knock, pulling me into a hug that lasted longer than usual. Nervous, she whispered. Terrified, I admitted.
Good.
That means you still care. The living room was quieter than I remembered. Dad sat in his usual chair, but didn't dominate the space like before. Mom had set out coffee and cookies. Simple, not the elaborate spread she used to stress herself over. And Tobin. He stood near the window, hands in his pockets, looking leaner.
Cleaner.
His eyes were clear in a way I hadn't seen in years. Hey, he said quietly. Hey yourself. We stood there awkwardly for a moment before Mom cleared her throat. Coffee, Elias?
Sure.
Black, thanks. We all sat down, carefully, like we were handling explosives. Nobody spoke for a solid minute. Then Tobin broke the silence. I owe you an apology, he said, looking directly at me.
A real one.
Not the kind I've given before. I stayed quiet, letting him continue. You didn't ruin my life by freezing the trust. I did that all by myself. And you probably saved it, even if I was too stupid to see it then. Dad shifted in his chair.
We all owe you an apology, son.
What we asked of you that night was wrong. What I did with the trust was... He struggled for the word. Inexcusable. Mom nodded, wiping her eyes. We put you in an impossible position. We treated you like a bank instead of our child. I took a sip of coffee, letting their words settle. I appreciate that.
Really?
But apologies are just words unless things actually change. They have, Rhea said quickly. Dad's been transparent about every expense. Tobin's been in meetings 5 times a week. Mom's been working on boundaries, Mom finished. Apparently, I never learned those. A small, unexpected laugh escaped me. None of us did. Tobin sat forward, elbows on his knees. I'm 92 days sober. I got a job at a warehouse. It's not glamorous, but it's honest work. And I'm paying back what I can.
Slowly.
Very slowly. That's good, Tobin. I'm proud of you. His eyes got watery. You saved me, man. I shook my head.
No.
You saved yourself. I just stopped covering the hole you kept digging. He smiled faintly, sad but genuine. Guess you were right after all. We talked for another hour. Real talk. Hard talk. The kind that doesn't fix everything, but at least acknowledges the damage. As I stood to leave, Dad walked me to the door. Will you come back? He asked. For Thanksgiving?
I thought about it.
Maybe. If everyone can handle me being different now. Different how? I have boundaries now, I said. Real ones. And I won't apologize for them. Dad nodded slowly. Fair enough. Driving home that night, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not the naive kind that ignores reality, but the earned kind that comes from surviving hard truths. My phone buzzed at a red light. A text from Tobin. Thanks for not giving up on us. Even when we gave up on ourselves. I smiled, typing back. No. I saved myself. And that's what finally saved us. If there's one thing I learned from all this, it's that family loyalty without boundaries isn't loyalty, it's servitude. Real love doesn't demand your sacrifice. It respects your strength. Sometimes the only way to fix a broken family isn't by giving in. It's by walking away long enough for everyone to see what breaking you would actually cost. That's what I did. And when I finally said no, the whole family learned what power really sounds like. Not anger. Not revenge. Just quiet, immovable truth. If this story hit home for you, Smash that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss our next powerful story. Drop a comment below telling us what you would have done in Elias's situation. Your thoughts might inspire someone else who needs to hear it. And if you know someone struggling with family boundaries, share this video. Sometimes people need to know they're not alone. Thanks for watching, and remember, saying no to the wrong things is how you say yes to yourself.